If a thing exists on the internet, there's probably a tier list for it. And as someone who's written a few articles for Maxroll, well, I'm pretty familiar with tier lists at this point. Today, I wanted to make a tier list for all of the sorcerer-specific uniques in Diablo 4. Mostly because I keep getting a lot of them as drops, and I've been tempted to use them. In fact, I've experimented with quite a few, with mixed results. Some are absolutely excellent. Others, I really regret knowing they even exist. And so today, I'm going to classify them from best to worst. S tier is something that's so good, it's pretty much an auto-include in most if not every build, and F tier is so bad that it makes your build objectively worse by including it, even over leaving an item slot open. As part of this, I'm only going to be covering the sorcerer-specific uniques, not those that are more general, such as Temerity, that can be used on multiple different classes. This is, of course, a tier list, therefore it's objective fact. There is no opinion here, and people who don't understand sarcasm may have a little trouble with this video. Now, this is my first Diablo 4 tier list, so I apologize if I'm a little new at this, but if you end up liking it and want to see more, do be sure to get subscribed, leave a like, and let me know down in the comments what other tier lists you want to see after this. That said, and without further ado, let's get into it. Starting with number 1, Esadora's Overflowing Cameo. In D tier. Why is it in D tier? Because there's a lot of power in the amulet slot. You get 50% increased effect of a legendary aspect, you get skill ranks, you get passive ranks. There's so much going on here that Esadora's doesn't really have. Maybe if you're a crackling energy build, it's okay. I couldn't figure out a way to make it work. Even when I tried combining it with things like Arc Lash, Ball Lightning, Chain Lightning, it just felt worse than a rare, never mind a legendary. So it gets a D tier. And we've got Esu's Heirloom, or Isu's Heirloom, I don't know how this is pronounced. I'm putting it in B tier. It's not bad. Getting crit chance for movement speed is good, and getting movement speed is even better. Who doesn't want to go faster after all? The problem is, boots have two things that this doesn't. Ranks to Teleport and ranks to Frost Nova, skills that are almost ubiquitous on the Sorcerer class right now. Getting crit is good, but there's other ways to make up for your crit chance, and so overall, this felt like a B tier. It's a very solid item. It's something a lot of people will use, but in many cases, it's not best in slot. Then we have Flamescar, which I'm putting in C tier, because after testing, Incinerate it seems bad, but if you're going to be playing Incinerate anyway, Flamescar doesn't seem terrible. At least if you can get one with high enough item power. This is in part because item power determines a lot more when it comes to your weapon than the actual stats on the item, at least for a lot of the builds I've played, and getting those embers did seem like they added a good bit of damage. Unfortunately, Incinerate doesn't seem that good, standing still and channeling seems quite frankly terrible, and I do think a well-rolled rare with a legendary aspect would be better, so it gets C tier. Usable, very niche, probably not good. Next up, Gloves of the Illuminator, which I went into with the thought of how bad could it be? Oh, far worse than I was expecting. Fireball's terrible, and this makes it worse. This item is going in F tier, and I don't really want to talk about it further. Instead, moving on to Iceheart Praise, which I've put in A tier, because it's a genuinely solid item. You get a lot of extra clear from the multiple expanding Ice Novas, at least when there's the mob density to support it. This is also good if you teleport into a group of enemies and don't have Raiment of the Infinite. You can kind of freeze Prolif by killing some stuff, the pack should explode, and it's relatively spread out, which grabs a couple of enemies around the outer edges. If you have Raiment of the Infinite, I don't think Iceheart Praise really matter, but if you're not using Shatter, you're not using a Fireball for an Explodey effect, this is a great way to add more clear, especially if you're using the Ice Shards enchantment. So it gets a solid rating in A tier. And speaking of Raiment of the Infinite, where does it go? I'll let you think for a second. Yeah, of course it's S tier. This is the best item that a sorcerer can get. Automatically stunning enemies is great. Teleport has a short cooldown. You're going to be using it anyway. Grouping things up makes it even better. So yeah, S tier. You do lose defenses as opposed to a rare, but it feels absolutely worth it. The case where you get a lot of quality of life, a lot of utility, a little bit of damage, totally makes up for the lack of defenses, at least for the keys that I've played so far. Now, maybe there's a really niche build out there that doesn't actually want to use Raiment, but I think the reason most people aren't using it is because they don't have it yet, and we're just going to see more and more use as people continue to play, and in the season when people go hard. Then there's the Staff of Endless Rage, which is in D tier. It's a fireball item. I could probably just leave it at that, but I want to explain a little more. Two-handed weapons versus one-handed weapons. Two-handed weapons offer a lot of damage, which, to be fair, Staff of Endless Rage does offer quite a bit of damage. One-handed weapons offer utility. In most cases, the utility is invaluable, things like cooldown recovery, resource generation, etc. Staff of Endless Rage, it's actually a little bit in between the two, between damage and utility. The problem is, it's a fireball weapon, and fireball's terrible, and I just couldn't see myself using this on a different build. Like, okay, maybe I don't care about cast rate. Maybe I'm doing some sort of proc build, a conjuration build, for example. Maybe even then, you double the effect of a legendary aspect. And there's so many aspects that are so powerful that if I'm going to use a two-handed weapon, I'd rather get a legendary aspect out of it, rather than have a passive for fireball, which just isn't good. And last but not least, Staff of Masen, which I had a lot of trouble placing, actually. I ended up going with C tier. And it could be a little lower, could be D tier, could be a little higher, could be B tier. From what I found, Charged Bolts isn't bad. It might actually be a viable build archetype. And having Charged Bolts pierce through enemies was quite good. But a problem with Charged Bolts and using the staff is, well, it's a staff, and losing the resource generation or resource efficiency of a one-handed weapon was really rough when I was trying it just a little bit. Now, to be fair, you do get lucky hit chance to generate resources. That's at least something. But the resource efficiency, lowering the cost of charge bolts, felt really, really important. Then again, your clear's kind of bad if a charge bolts just slam into an enemy and disappear, so it does feel like this is kind of mandatory if you're going to play a dedicated charge bolts build. So out of everything on this list, I think the Staff of Masen is the one that I'm most likely to revisit in the future. I kind of want to test that build, play it a little more, and see if there's actually something there. Who knows, maybe I'll end up with a PoE style Spark build. Or maybe it is just better to use a rare after all. You might lose some AoE, but you could probably make up for that with a Firebolt enchantment, Shatter, etc. And at the end of the day, maybe all you need is to shotgun single targets? I'll have to see. It should also be noted that if you're going to use a two-handed weapon, there's a very powerful aspect for charged bolts. It causes them to be attracted to enemies, which does seem quite good. And so I'm not sure here what the better balance is. But overall, these are my thoughts on the Sorcerer uniques. Raiment of the Infinite is very good and should be used in most, if not all, builds. Iceheart Praise and Esu's Heirloom are also quite good and very usable. Flamescar could be good if Incinerate was actually good, although I suspect at the top end, a rare beats it out. Staff of Masen, kind of the same thing, at least based on my testing so far. Esadora's, I like it in theory, but I feel like it has to do 5, 6, 10 times the damage before it actually adds to your character's power rather than takes away from it. Staff of the Endless Rage and Gloves of the Illuminator, if Fireball was better, maybe they'd be better. They're held back by being tied to a really bad core skill. But now I have two questions. First up, did you like this video? And if so, do you want to see more tier lists? Be sure to let me know down below. And second of all, what's your favorite unique item in Diablo 4? Is it one of the items I've talked about here, or something else entirely because maybe you're playing a different class, or maybe you really like a generic item? Do be sure to let me know down in the comments below, and don't forget to leave a like while you're down there. But before I go, a special thanks to my patrons and channel members for their continued support. For as low as $1 a month, you can help make videos just like this one possible. And who knows, maybe they'll end up being a tier list funded by you. If you want something else to watch, maybe check out my Ice Shard Sorc guide, my recent Helltide guide, or the recommendation that's on screen right now. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed. Remember, this really is just for entertainment purposes only, it's not meant to be super serious, and I hope to see you again sometime soon.